The red on-air light glows with a patience that feels almost cruel. It doesn't blink. It doesn't rush. It simply waits, reminding everyone in the room that whatever happens next will belong to the world. Taehyung sits on the couch with his hands folded loosely, posture relaxed in the way people learn only after years of being watched. The studio smells faintly of warm cables, polished wood, and something sweet drifting in from the audience, perfume mixed with anticipation. Jimmy Fallon smiles beside him, that familiar smile balanced carefully between humor and caution, the kind he wears when he knows the next question might change the temperature of the room. "So," Jimmy says, voice light, conversational, almost casual. "Almost. People say there are some things you never talk about." The audience laughs softly, but it's the nervous kind. The kind that fills space while everyone waits to see where the line is. Taehyung's eyes lift, catching the overhead lights. For a second they look like reflections on water, steady, deep, unreadable. He nods once, not defensive, not eager, just present. "I think," he says, choosing each word with the care of someone who understands how easily words can become headlines. "Some things aren't meant to be avoided. They're meant to be protected." The laughter dies instantly, not dramatically, it just stops, as if someone gently closed a door. Jimmy's eyebrows rise and he glances briefly at his cue card, then back at Taehyung. The band doesn't play. The laugh sign stays dark. The studio seems to lean forward all at once, thousands of breaths aligning into a single, suspended moment. "And one of those things?" Jimmy asks. Taehyung exhales, slow and measured. Somewhere above them, a lighting rig hums softly, a mechanical sound that suddenly feels louder than it should. He adjusts his shoulders by the smallest margin, not out of tension, but acceptance, like someone stepping into cold water, knowing the shock will pass. "Marriage," he says. The word lands heavy, not explosive, heavy. It settles into the room instead of bouncing off it. No one claps. No one laughs. A bracelet slides against a wrist in the front row. Someone clears their throat and immediately regrets it. Jimmy's smile falters just a little. "That's honest," he says quietly. Taehyung nods. Honesty usually is. There's no arrogance in it, no performance, just a statement plain and grounded. "I've thought about it," Taehyung continues. "Not as a fantasy, not as a headline, but as a responsibility." The camera cuts to Jimmy, whose expression has softened into something unguarded. He blinks once, then again, and laughs under his breath, pressing his hand lightly to his chest as if surprised by the feeling rising there. "Well," Jimmy says, voice wavering just enough for the audience to notice, "that's not what most people expect to hear." Taehyung smiles then, small and human. That's usually a good sign. The studio remains silent, not awkwardly but reverently. This isn't the silence of confusion. It's the silence of listening. In the green room earlier, Taehyung had stood alone for a moment, staring at his reflection in a mirror framed by warm bulbs. Not the mirror fans imagine, not the idle version, but the one that shows small truths, the faint line under the eyes, the calm that comes only after long decisions. He'd pressed 2 fingers to his pulse and reminded himself why he was here. Not to provoke, not to confess, but to stop pretending that care was the same thing as fear. Now on the couch, he feels that same steadiness return. "I don't know when," he says, eyes briefly meeting the camera not as a lens but as a window. "But I know why." The audience exhales together. "Because at some point," Taehyung continues, "you realize that protecting love by hiding it can turn into something else. And I don't want that." Jimmy swallows hard. He nods slowly, visibly moved. And for a moment, the host is no longer the center of the show. Just another person sitting across from someone being brave in a way that doesn't shout. "My mom used to say," Jimmy adds, voice quieter now, "that real promises are made long before anyone hears about them." Taehyung's smile widens just a fraction. "I believe that." The band remains silent, The cameras don't rush. The studio doesn't breathe. And somewhere beyond the lights, beyond the applause that will eventually come, something irreversible has already happened. Applause finally arrives, but it feels delayed, like thunder following a lightning strike everyone already felt in their bones. It rolls through the studio unevenly, some clapping enthusiastic, some hesitant, some almost reverent. Jimmy lets it happen for a few seconds longer than usual before lifting his hand gently, easing the room back into calm. Taehyung bows his head slightly, a reflex shaped by years on stage, but when he looks up again, there's something different in his eyes. Not defiance, not relief, resolution. The kind that doesn't announce itself loudly but doesn't retreat either. "We're going to take a quick break," Jimmy says, voice steady, professional. "But we'll be right back." The red light dims, cameras pull back, the studio exhales. As soon as the signal cuts, the silence fractures into whispers. Producers move faster than before. A stagehand adjusts a cable that doesn't need adjusting. Someone laughs too loudly near the band, then stops. Taehyung remains seated for a moment, hands resting on his knees, as if giving his body time to catch up with the decision his words have already made. When he finally stands, an assistant approaches with a practiced smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. "Green room," she says softly. The hallway behind the set smells of dust and coffee and old paint, the backstage scent of 1,000 shows that ended without consequences. Today feels different. Today feels like something that will be replayed, slowed down, quoted, dissected. In the green room, Taehyung loosens the top button of his jacket and sinks into the couch. The mirror across from him reflects a man who looks calm enough to be dangerous. His phone vibrates once, then again, then doesn't stop. He doesn't look yet. He knows what's waiting, notifications stacking like falling dominoes, group chats lighting up, headlines being drafted in real time by people who weren't in the room but are already certain they understand what he meant. A manager steps in quietly, closing the door behind him. He doesn't sit. "That was strong," the manager says, choosing the word carefully like it might explode if handled wrong. Taehyung nods. "It was honest." The manager exhales through his nose. Honesty travels fast. "So does silence," Taehyung replies. The manager studies him for a moment, then looks away. "HYBE will want to talk." "I know." Another vibration. This time Taehyung glances down. His name is already trending. Taehyung married. Jimmy Fallon silence. BTS V. The words blur together, less language than noise. He locks the screen and sets the phone face down on the table as if that might quiet it. Back in the studio, Jimmy stands near his desk, rubbing his palms together slowly. He looks over as Taehyung re-enters, his expression unreadable until it softens into something almost brotherly. "You okay?" Jimmy asks, low enough that only Taehyung can hear. Taehyung smiles faintly. "I will be." Jimmy nods. "That answer," he says after a beat, "that wasn't planned, was it?" "No," Taehyung admits, "but it wasn't sudden either." The cue light flicks back on. The band plays a short, upbeat riff, like a bridge over deep water. The audience claps again, louder this time, unsure whether they're applauding courage or simply trying to release the tension still clinging to their seats. The rest of the segment moves on safer ground. A joke about touring, a light story about food. Taehyung laughs when expected, smiles when prompted, performs the familiar choreography of charm with precision honed over years. To the casual viewer, nothing is wrong. But underneath it, something has shifted. When the tapping ends, the audience rises to its feet. Some cheer wildly. Others watch him with an intensity that feels personal, almost possessive. As Taehyung bows, he catches sight of a fan near the aisle holding a handmade sign. It doesn't mention marriage. It doesn't ask questions. It simply says, "Be happy." His chest tightens unexpectedly. Outside, night has settled over the city, thick with neon and traffic and possibility. Taehyung steps into the car, the door closing with a solid finality that feels symbolic whether he wants it to or not. Only then does he check his phone. Messages flood in from every direction. Friends, staff, distant acquaintances suddenly urgent. News alerts stack one on top of another. V opens up about marriage on US television. Fans divided after Taehyung's honest answer. HYBE faces questions after Fallon appearance. He scrolls, jaw tightening. One message stops him. It's from someone saved not as a name, but as a color. Linen. I saw it, the message reads. Breathe. Taehyung closes his eyes, just for a second, letting the vibration of the car and the hum of the city ground him. He types back slowly. I meant it. The reply comes almost instantly. I know. At the hotel, the room feels too quiet, like it's holding its breath. Taehyung kicks off his shoes and sits on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen without really seeing it. Another message arrives, this one from his company. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. HYBE headquarters. No emojis, no reassurance. Just logistics. He sets the phone down and leans back, staring at the ceiling. The lights from outside trace shifting patterns across the walls, restless and unavoidable. He thinks about the word responsibility, about how it felt leaving his mouth, about how carefully it landed, and how violently it's now being pulled apart. He thinks about kitchens, about doors that can close, about windows that can open when chosen, not demanded. The storm hasn't fully arrived yet, but he can hear it gathering. And this time, he doesn't look for shelter. He stays exactly where he is. Morning arrives without kindness. The light through the hotel curtains is sharp and unforgiving, slicing the room into pale rectangles that feel more like exposure than warmth. Taehyung wakes before his alarm, heart already moving faster than it should, as if his body has been awake all night negotiating with the future. His phone lies face down on the nightstand. He doesn't touch it immediately. Instead, he listens. The distant sound of traffic, a door closing somewhere down the hall, the soft hum of the city preparing itself for another ordinary day, unaware that his won't be. When he finally checks the screen, the notifications haven't slowed. If anything, they've multiplied. Articles translated into dozens of languages. Clips of his answer sliced into seconds, looped, captioned, miscaptioned. Some headlines praise his courage. Others sharpen his words into weapons. He stops scrolling when he sees his mother's name flash across a comment thread, attached to a photograph pulled from years ago. His jaw tightens. He locks the phone and sits up, grounding his feet against the cold floor. At HYBE headquarters, the building gleams with its usual precision. Glass, steel, clean lines designed to suggest transparency while revealing nothing at all. As Taehyung steps inside, conversations soften. Eyes follow him, then slide away. The air feels thinner here, as if honesty consumes oxygen. The meeting room is already full. Executives line the long table, laptops open, screens glowing with graphs and headlines instead of faces. PR, legal, brand strategy, digital analytics. Each of them looks composed, prepared, distant. At the head of the table sits Bang Si-hyuk, hands folded, expression unreadable. Taehyung bows, respectful, automatic, human. Sit, Bang says. Taehyung does. For a moment, no one speaks. A projector hums softly, filling the silence with something mechanical and patient. Then the screen lights up. His face, frozen mid-sentence from the Fallon interview. I think about marriage as responsibility first. Red arrows, highlighted captions, engagement metrics scrolling down the side like a stock ticker. As of this morning, a PR executive begins, voice calm but tight. Your name has generated over 40 million mentions globally. Sentiment analysis shows severe polarization, particularly in domestic markets. Polarization, Bang repeats, meaning. Meaning, she says carefully, they're not angry because they hate him. They're angry because they feel displaced. Taehyung looks up. Displaced from what? From him, she doesn't say out loud. Another executive clears his throat. Advertisers are nervous. One campaign has paused. Others are requesting clarification. Bang's eyes stay on Taehyung. Did you confirm marriage? No, Taehyung says evenly. I confirmed thought. That distinction will be lost, Bang replies. Thought doesn't trend, implication does. A lawyer slides a document forward. Your contract includes morality clauses, not about marriage specifically, but about maintaining a certain image. And honesty violates that, Taehyung asks. Bang exhales slowly. Honesty without control does. The words settle heavy between them. We can manage this, the PR executive continues. If we reposition your statement as philosophical, abstract, about values, not intention. Taehyung's lips press together. So we say I didn't mean what I said. We say, Bang corrects, that the audience misunderstood. Silence stretches. And if I don't agree, Taehyung asks. Bang finally leans back. Then we protect the group. That may require limiting your exposure. Limiting, such a gentle word for disappearance. Taehyung nods slowly, absorbing it. You taught us to be artists, he says, not products. Bang's gaze hardens, not with anger but fatigue. I taught you how to survive. Survival isn't living, Taehyung replies quietly. The meeting adjourns without resolution. Outside the room, the hallway feels colder longer. His phone buzzes again. Messages from the members appear one by one. You okay? That was intense. Proud of you, but wow. Call me when you can. He types a short reply. I'm fine, just tired. He doesn't mention the threat beneath the words. By afternoon, rumors bloom faster than facts. A leaked memo claims his solo activities will be suspended. Another suggests internal conflict. Fans gather outside the building, some holding signs of support, others demanding answers. Taehyung watches from an upper window, the crowd a shifting mosaic of devotion and fear. He understands both too well. Back at the hotel, he finally calls Lennon. The line connects immediately. How bad, they ask. Loud, he answers. A pause, then loud passes. He sits on the floor, back against the bed, phone pressed to his ear like an anchor. They want to turn it into a metaphor. They always do. And if I don't let them, they'll push harder. He closes his eyes. I don't want to fight. Lennon's voice softens. Then don't stand. Let them tire themselves out. There's a knock at the door, official sharp. A company representative waits outside, expression neutral. Director Bang would like another conversation tonight. Taehyung nods. He already knew there would be another. When the door closes, he looks at his reflection in the darkened mirror. Not the idol, not the symbol, just a man who said something true and is now watching the world decide how much that costs. Outside, the city keeps moving. Inside, the storm tightens its grip. And Taehyung understands now that silence, once broken, cannot be repaired. Only replaced. Night settles over the city like a held breath that refuses to release. From the backseat of the car, Taehyung watches streetlights smear into lines of gold against the window, each one passing too quickly to hold. His phone vibrates again in his pocket. He doesn't check it. Not yet. Some messages are easier to face when they stop moving. HYBE's building glows ahead, all glass and certainty, a place designed to look open while deciding everything behind closed doors. Inside, the lobby is quieter than usual. No music, no chatter, Just the faint echo of footsteps and the low hum of air conditioning doing its job too well. Bang Si-hyuk waits in a smaller conference room this time. No long table, no audience, just 2 chairs, a bottle of water between them untouched. "Sit," Bang says again, softer now. Taehyung does. For a long moment, Bang studies him the way someone studies a familiar problem that has suddenly changed shape. "You knew this would happen," Bang says finally. "I knew something would happen," Taehyung replies. "I didn't know how much it would scare people." "It scares investors," Bang corrects. "Fans, partners, systems don't like uncertainty." Taehyung nods. "People do." Bang sighs, rubbing a hand over his face. "You spoke like a man who doesn't need permission." "I spoke like someone tired of asking for it." That lands heavier than Taehyung expects. Bang looks at him sharply, then away, eyes drifting toward the dark window. "When we started," Bang says, voice lower, almost reflective, "I promised the world something ideal, something clean, something they could believe in without risk." "And now," Taehyung asks. "Now they realize ideals grow up." Bang turns back. "You don't get to grow up alone." Taehyung leans forward slightly. "I'm not asking to be alone. I'm asking to be real." Silence stretches, thick and complicated. Finally, Bang speaks again. "We need an ending," he says. "The public doesn't live comfortably in open questions." "What kind of ending?" Taehyung asks, though he already knows. "A statement, controlled, clear. You clarify that your words were about values, not personal plans. You reassure fans, you protect the group." "And if I refuse?" Bang's eyes harden, not cruel but resolved. "Then we limit your activities. No interviews, no solo schedules. You fade until the noise dies." Fade, another gentle word. Taehyung sits back, absorbing it. He thinks of the studio silence, of the sign that said "be happy," of Lennon's voice telling him to stand still and let the storm pass. "I won't lie," he says. Bang exhales slowly. "Truth doesn't have to be loud." "No," Taehyung agrees, "but it does have to be whole." The meeting ends without a handshake. Outside, reporters wait despite the late hour, cameras lifting instinctively as Taehyung steps through the doors. He keeps his head down, walking past the questions that tumble over each other like waves. "Are you in a relationship? Is HYBE punishing you? Did BTS know?" He doesn't answer. Back at the hotel, exhaustion finally catches him. Not the physical kind, but the deeper one that settles into bones after too much deciding. He sits on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling past chaos until he finds a single message. "Lennon, come home." He closes his eyes. Home isn't a place, not really. It's a permission he rarely gives himself. Tonight he does. The apartment is dim and quiet when he arrives, lit only by the kitchen lamp. Lennon stands by the counter, sleeves rolled, hair pulled back messily. No questions, just presence. Taehyung drops his bag and exhales, the sound breaking something open inside him. Lennon steps closer, resting a hand lightly against his chest, feeling his breath slow. "They want an ending," Taehyung says quietly. "They always do," Lennon replies. "Do you?" He considers it. "I want a middle, something that keeps going." Lennon smiles faintly. "That's called living." They sit at the table with 2 cups of tea growing cold between them. Outside, sirens pass and fade. The world continues its loud insistence on being noticed. "Whatever happens," Lennon says after a while, "don't apologize for knowing what you want." Taehyung nods. "I won't." Later, alone in the quiet, he opens his phone and types a message he hasn't been allowed to send before. Not to fans, not to the company. To himself. "You're allowed to choose." The next morning, headlines sharpen. Rumors harden into assumptions. Support and anger crash into each other online like weather systems colliding. The press conference room smells like metal and perfume, a combination that always means something is about to be sold. Cameras line the walls in perfect formation, lenses dark and patient, waiting to be fed. Journalists murmur to one another in low, practiced voices, flipping notebooks, adjusting microphones, rehearsing the versions of the story they hope to leave with. Taehyung stands just behind the curtain, listening to the sound of the room as if it were weather. He can tell when a storm is impatient. This one is. A staff member glances at him, hesitant. 2 minutes, she says. He nods. In his pocket, his phone vibrates once. A message from Lennon. No matter how they frame it, speak like you live. He exhales slowly, presses his thumb against the screen in acknowledgement, and slips the phone away. The curtain parts. Flashbulbs erupt immediately, white and merciless. Taehyung walks to the podium without rushing, bows once deep, deliberate, and lifts his head. The room quiets, not completely, but enough. I know my words have caused confusion, he begins, voice steady, unadorned. That's my responsibility. Pens hover, fingers pause above keyboards. When I spoke on the show, he continues, I wasn't announcing a plan. I wasn't teasing a secret. I was answering honestly about how I think. A reporter raises a hand, already impatient. Taehyung keeps going. I think about marriage as responsibility, about being reliable, about choosing someone not as an image but as a daily practice. The room shifts. This isn't the apology they prepared for. I understand that some people felt hurt or afraid, he says. If you believed my sincerity was only part of a performance, then my words might feel like a betrayal. For that pain, I am sorry. Cameras click faster. But I won't apologize for believing that love doesn't need permission to be meaningful. A murmur ripples through the crowd. A reporter calls out, Are you confirming a relationship? Taehyung meets the lights directly. I'm confirming that I'm a person who wants to live honestly. That's all. Another voice cuts in. Did your company approve this statement? He pauses, just long enough to make the silence intentional. This statement is mine. Somewhere behind the cameras, someone inhales sharply. I will continue to work, Taehyung says. I will continue to create. I will continue to respect the people who support me. But I can't go back to pretending that caring deeply is something to hide. He bows again once, and steps away before the questions can regroup. Outside, the air feels colder, cleaner. Protesters and supporters stand across the street in uneven clusters. Some chant, some hold signs, some simply watch. As Taehyung walks past, a small ripple of movement passes through the crowd. A few fans bow. One person holds up a phone screen with a simple message typed in large letters. Thank you for being human. He bows back, a private gesture made briefly public, and keeps moving. The backlash doesn't disappear, it transforms. Some sponsors step away quietly, others stay. Fans argue online, then listen, then argue again. The noise rises, peaks, and slowly begins to lose its sharpness. Inside HYBE, meetings continue without him. Decisions are made. Schedules are revised. The system adjusts begrudgingly around the space he created. Bang watches the coverage from his office, hands folded, eyes tired. When Taehyung's statement replays on the screen, Bang doesn't pause it. He lets it run. That evening, Taehyung returns to the apartment as the sky darkens into blue. Lennon is waiting, sitting cross-legged on the couch, television muted, headlines scrolling silently across the bottom of the screen. It's done, Taehyung says. Lennon looks up. For today. He smiles faintly. For today. They sit together without speaking, the quiet no longer tense, just shared. 2 cups of tea steam on the table, untouched, patient. Are you scared? Lennon asks eventually. Taehyung considers it. I was, he says. I'm not anymore. Outside, rain begins to fall, light at first, then steady. tapping against the window like a question that doesn't demand an answer. Taehyung stands and moves toward it, pulling the curtain aside. He thinks of the studio silence, of Jimmy's eyes shining, of a room full of people listening instead of consuming. He closes the door. Then with a small, deliberate motion, he opens the window. The night air carries the city's complicated perfume, wet pavement, distant food carts, electricity, life. He breathes it in fully, without apology. Tomorrow will bring new headlines, new expectations, new negotiations. But tonight, he has exactly what he said he wanted. A door he can close, and a window he can open whenever he chooses. The days after the press conference stretch oddly, not loud like a storm anymore, but dense like fog that refuses to lift. Taehyung moves through them with deliberate calm. No schedules, no flights, no stages, just time, an unfamiliar luxury that feels both freeing and unsettling. He wakes early out of habit more than necessity. Morning light slips through the open window, softer now, less interrogating. The city hums at a lower volume. Even the phone, once relentless, seems to have learned restraint. Notifications still arrive, but spaced out, less frantic, as if the world is deciding how hard it wants to keep shouting. Taehyung scrolls carefully. Support messages have begun to outweigh the anger. Not overwhelmingly, not magically, but enough to change the texture of the noise. Fans write long posts instead of slogans. Some admit they were scared. Others say they didn't know they needed someone to say what he said until he did. One message stands out. I stayed because you didn't run. He sets the phone down and lets that sit. At the company, the silence has a different quality. It's not punishment anymore. It's recalibration. Meetings continue without his presence, but his absence is noted in ways that can't be quantified. Decisions take longer. Statements sound more careful. The system, forced to bend, discovers it doesn't immediately break. Bang calls in the afternoon. No assistance, no agenda. You're still trending, Bang says, voice dry. Taehyung smiles faintly. Good or bad? Quieter, Bang replies. Which is worse for panic, better for thinking. They sit in silence on opposite ends of the line. You didn't apologize the way they wanted, Bang says finally. I apologize the way I meant, Taehyung answers. A pause, then unexpectedly Bang chuckles softly. You always were difficult. You made me that way, Taehyung says. Bang exhales. We'll need to adjust, contracts, timelines, expectations. I know. But Bang adds, you didn't destroy anything. Taehyung closes his eyes briefly. Neither did you. The call ends without ceremony, but something in Taehyung's chest loosens anyway. That evening he and Lennon walk through a quiet neighborhood, hands brushing but not quite holding. The air smells like damp leaves and late dinners. No cameras, no whispers, just ordinary footsteps on ordinary pavement. A passerby recognizes him, hesitates, then bows slightly. Be well, she says, and keeps walking. Taehyung stops for a second, surprised by the simplicity of it. At home, they cook together. He burns the toast again, distracted. Lennon laughs and scrapes it clean with practiced patience. The kettle clicks off. Steam fogs the kitchen window, erasing the city beyond it. This, Lennon says, gesturing vaguely at the room, is what they can't sell. Taehyung nods. That's why it scares them. Later, alone, he opens a notebook he hasn't touched in years. Not lyrics, not plans, just thoughts. He writes slowly without worrying how it sounds. I'm learning that courage isn't volume, it's consistency. He closes the notebook and leaves it on the table, unhidden. The invitation comes a week later. A charity concert, small, acoustic, no interviews attached, optional attendance, no pressure. Taehyung stares at the message for a long moment, then smiles. On stage, the lights are low. No choreography, no spectacle, just a microphone, a guitar, and an audience that feels closer than usual. When he sings, his voice doesn't reach for perfection. It reaches for truth. After the final note fades, the applause is gentle, sustained, warm. The kind that doesn't demand anything in return. Backstage, Fallon sends a message. "Still thinking about that answer. Hope you're okay." Taehyung replies with a photo of 2 cups of tea by an open window. Nothing else. Jimmy sends back a single heart. That night the city breathes outside the window, alive and indifferent. Headlines still exist. Opinions still circulate. The industry still watches. But inside the room, time slows to a human pace. Taehyung closes the door. Then he opens the window. Not as a statement. Not as a rebellion. But as a habit he intends to keep. And somewhere between the noise he left behind and the quiet he chose, Taehyung understands that the studio didn't go silent because he spoke about marriage. Time doesn't heal the way people promise it will. It clarifies. Weeks pass, then months, and the sharp edges of the moment dull into something more precise. Taehyung notices it in small ways. The questions change. The headlines grow less speculative, more reflective. The word scandal quietly disappears, replaced by phrases like shift, moment, conversation. He returns to the studio on a gray afternoon, the kind of day that feels unfinished. The hallway smells familiar: wood polish, coffee, cables warming under lights. Staff members greet him carefully at first, then more normally, as if relearning a language they once spoke fluently. No one asks him to explain himself again. The producer hands him a demo track. "No pressure," she says quickly, "just if it speaks to you." He takes it home, listens alone, and feels something settle into place. Not excitement, alignment. Recording happens slowly. Taehyung doesn't rush the takes. He lets the silence between notes exist. When he sings, it's not about proving stability or reassuring anyone. It's about documenting where he stands now. The song doesn't mention marriage. It doesn't mention love explicitly at all. But it carries weight, the kind that comes from someone who has already chosen something and no longer needs applause for it. When the track is released, the reaction is different from anything before. No explosion, no chaos, just steady listening. People share it with captions that don't ask questions. They simply say how it made them feel. That night, Taehyung sits on the floor of the living room, back against the couch, laptop balanced on his knees. Lennon sits beside him, reading quietly. "You didn't explain," Lennon says without looking up. "I didn't need to," Taehyung replies. They listen to the song once more, not for critique, not for flaws, but to recognize the version of himself inside it. Later, Taehyung attends an industry dinner. Long table, soft lighting, conversations layered with strategy and politeness. Someone eventually brings it up cautiously. "You surprised a lot of people," an executive says. Taehyung nods. "I surprised myself too." "And if you had to do it again?" He considers the question genuinely. "I would speak slower," he says, "but I'd say the same thing." The executive smiles, unsure whether that's reassurance or warning. On the drive home, the city lights blur into streaks of color against the window. Taehyung watches them pass, thinking about the boy he used to be, terrified of saying the wrong thing, terrified of being misunderstood. He understands now that misunderstanding is inevitable. Silence is just a different kind of miscommunication. At home, he finds a handwritten letter slipped under the door. No return address. The paper is creased, careful. It reads, "I watched the show with my daughter. She asked why everyone got quiet. I told her it was because someone told the truth gently. Thank you." Taehyung folds the letter and places it in the notebook, between pages filled with thoughts he never plans to publish. The next invitation comes from Fallon again, not a show appearance. Dinner, no cameras, no expectations. When they meet, Jimmy looks relieved. "You know," he says, stirring his drink, "I keep replaying that moment. The silence wasn't awkward, it was respect catching up. Taehyung smiles. I felt that too. They talk about music, about exhaustion, about what it means to grow older in public. No sound bites, no rehearsed answers. Before they part, Jimmy says, if you ever want to talk on air again about anything, you know the door's open. Taehyung nods. I appreciate that. He walks home alone, hands in his coat pockets, breath visible in the cold. The city feels less like a stage now, more like a place. At the apartment, he opens the window out of habit. The noise rises up to meet him, cars, voices, a siren far away. Life, continuing without commentary. He thinks back to the studio, to the question that froze the room, to the choice he made in a single breath. He understands now that the moment mattered not because it was dramatic, but because it was irreversible. Once you speak honestly, you can't unlearn the sound of your own voice. Taehyung closes the notebook, turns off the lights, and lets the night in just a little longer. Tomorrow will come with its own questions. But tonight, he doesn't rehearse answers.